Every week you make so many little decisions about your money that you probably don't even notice. Like, do you buy a coffee or do you make one? Are you driving to work or taking the train? Are you grabbing lunch at the corner shop or making a sandwich at home? Now, these are all small amounts of money, $4 here, $15 there, but I'll tell you what, they add up. So if I asked you how much of your money goes to this kind of discretionary spending, do you reckon you'd be able to tell me a number? Well, that's what this episode is about. How to get control of your cash flow and make sure those micro decisions aren't scuttling your budget. That's today on Money and a Good Life. So let's talk about cash flow. My name's Stephanie Coombes and I'm here with the co-host Ryan Watson. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Steph. How are you?
I'm not too bad. And we've also got a senior advisor at Tribeca and a cash flow expert with us. Hello, Matthew Rea.
Hi, Steph. Hi, Ryan. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So when I hear cash flow, personally, I think about businesses and shops. But Ryan, what does that actually mean for someone like me, the idea of cash flow?
Yeah, it's about understanding your income that comes into a household, but then also your expenses as well. We find a lot of people don't have a conscious understanding of either of those. When they do, then they could be put in control or in charge of their household cash flow.
Beautiful. Now, I've heard it said before that you can kind of divvy up a lot of the population as either spenders or savers. Now, you've obviously, both of you in your professional life have dealt with spenders and savers. When people come to talk to you, do they usually know which group they belong to?
So I think people come to us with some kind of understanding whether they're a saver or a spender and maybe an idea of whether they want to change that or not, but you can use either to your advantage.
Okay, question without notice. Ryan, spender, saver?
Traditionally a spender, therefore I put structures in place like a mortgage and the like that make me responsible to others whereby I have to pay things back.
Okay.
So I put structure in place.
All right, Matthew, spender, saver?
Saver, naturally.
Oh, there you go. Oh, well, you two can fight later.
Or, opposites attract.
Or opposite.
Yeah.
So, well, okay, as someone who's probably got a little bit more of a spending tendency myself, can spenders become savers, do you think?
Yes. So it's against your natural flow or against your natural grain, but it definitely is possible. Ideally, use some kind of mechanism to help you make the behavioural choices easier, but it's definitely possible.
Well, that's good news. I mean, I reckon there are a lot of people who are out there who are like me. I might be a bit of a spender, but I pay my bills. But if I'm going to be honest, outside of that, I don't really know where my cash is going. Matt, when you talk to someone like me, how do you get the people like me to get control of their cash flow?
So a cash flow plan really comes in two steps. So it does start with an understanding of how much it costs you to live. Once you have that, you can then make proactive choices about what we should be doing with your income, with your cash flow that comes in general. To start with, I would say the understanding, making sure you know how much it costs you to live is the first thing to understand, so you know where you want to be allocating the money that comes in. Once you have that understanding of how much it costs to live, the next is put in place some kind of structure or a strategy to make sure that either you cap it at that or you identify the areas that you want to reduce it by. Often this is where people will stop their cash flow plan. They'll do a budget. They'll say, it costs me $80,000 a year to live, so I should be able to save $40,000 a year. A year down the track, they didn't save any money. They don't know why. Because they did the first half of the plan, but not the second half of the plan. The second half is once you understand how much it costs you to live, get some kind of structure in place to enable those decisions and make the day-to-day behaviours easier. The way we do that is with a bank account structure. This is how theoretically my money should be going, maybe 50% to fixed expenses, 50% to discretionary expenses. So line up your bank accounts that make it easier to do that, and you can control your discretionary expenses with the structure itself.
Yeah, in addition to that, I think when people understand whether a spender or a saver and how those opinions or mindsets have been formed, they can then be put in charge to try and change that if that's what they want.
So when it comes to getting control and understanding where your money's going, in a practical sense, should I be keeping a notebook or should I hit myself on the hand every time? How do I actually work out where my cash is going?
Yeah, and this is why we even like to talk more to cash flow than to budget. So a bit of growth versus fixed mindset. And, a lot of people are time poor. So structure creates freedom. So we help people understand their income and expenses, then put a structure in place whereby in a busy world, it just works for them, and particularly in the tap and go. So say we're using or working with someone on their discretionary account with a tap and go, when the money's run out, they can't spend anymore. So for me, I get money put into my discretionary account every Thursday. So I know what I start with. If you have a big weekend, you know where your Monday to Wednesday is going. So it just creates an awareness around the money. And I think having this conversation around cash flow as well, and we talk about spenders and savers, people can be really opinionated with themselves about the relationship they have with money. I think greater compassion around whether they're a spender or a saver and whether they understand cash flow or not. So if we can help dial down some cortisol, we find that pretty quickly they can form a much healthier relationship with cash flow and their overall money situation.
Well, I actually thought that was interesting that you admitted to actually being a spender naturally, because I think that there is a certain amount of shame if you're a spender, that you don't really want to admit to that, because there is a fair amount of judgment that's sort of tied up in people who like to spend money.
Yeah, and it's part of what we like to do as well, just open up the lines of the money conversation as well. There's a lot of guilt and there's shame. And, for us, money, it's not what you can have. It's how do we just form healthier relationships and healthier habits with money to then empower people to do the things that they really want to do in life.
We've talked a lot about people as singular entities going through the world spending money, but it's not always the case. People make money decisions in couples and in relationships, and that can add a certain amount of pressure on a relationship. I think that we can all agree with that. How do you deal with this if you're in a relationship and you've got money going into a discretionary account and maybe one person in that relationship is a spender and that other person is a saver?
And fair to say, Matt, there's generally a CFO within any one relationship and then someone who takes the back seat.
Definitely, yep. So one person will generally have a greater understanding of the cash flow. Sometimes that person has more worries because they understand the position in greater detail and that makes them scared, and the other person's happy to have their hands off the wheel. To your question on the couples and how that can relate, that is a real reason that a lot of people come to seek help, because either they're the person who has overspent or they can see their partner isn't controlling it very well. It comes down to knowing that you have discretionary money each and knowing that you have money to spend, which is just there to be spent. It isn't important for the couple's goals overall. If you're spending that money, it doesn't mean that you can't upgrade the house or whatever it is you want to do in the future. You have your own money that you can spend without guilt. And it removes any kind of friction between two people who may have guilt or blame or some kind of negative emotion attached to how they spend. As long as you have money going to individual accounts, we always recommend that you have an account in just your own name. You can remove all that.
How many accounts do you reckon you should have? So you've got the discretionary spending account. What else should you have there? So
in a couple, we recommend 4 accounts. There is situations where you might have more if you're self-employed or if you have an investment property or things like that. But just for the standard couple, it would be 1 fixed account and then 3 discretionary accounts. So the fixed account would be the where the income comes in, where the fixed bills come from. Ideally, it's an offset account if they have a mortgage. The 3 discretionary accounts will be 1 for the couple, which is where all the household expenses go through. So groceries, when they go out for dinner together, gifts for the family, those type of things. And then a discretionary account each, where money can go in there. You can spend on whatever you like, whatever's important to you. If it's coffees, if it's gambling, if it's going out with your mates, whatever it is, you can spend it on what makes you happy. And you do that once a week. And when it runs out, ideally, you've stopped. Yep.
And it refills the next week.
Exactly.
And if you blow out, it's not a big deal, but try and keep it in the next week.
And that's the point. So you only ever have one job, and it's making that discretionary money last until the next payday. If you've done that, your cash flow plan is on track. The very important structural rules is to make sure you don't have extra transfers go to the discretionary accounts or any discretionary expenses from the fixed account. All cash flow plans, to be honest, all bank account structures, Barefoot Investors, the other ones that you might see online, have this same philosophy. So you're separating your fixed expenses, which are fixed by nature. You don't really need to worry about reining them in. You just need to understand
like your
them.
Rent, your mortgage, your gas, electricity,
insurances, things you've agreed to pay for. Health is another example that it can be variable, the health expense, but you're not going to not go to the dentist because you want to save money. That's an important expense. So that they can live up in the fixed account. The things you need to control are the accounts down the bottom 3 discretionary accounts. and you do that with that weekly transfer, you just need to make sure that money lasts until your next Monday for me, Thursday for Ryan.
Thursday for me, and happy to volunteer. I've got $117.97 till Thursday.
That's not bad.
It's not bad.
That's not bad.
It was a quietish weekend.
Sounds like lunch is on you.
Yeah, we'll talk.
And your purpose for what you might spend that money on changes over time. So I've realised that when I first set this up, the behavioural change it made for me was I would spend less money on takeaway lunches because that wasn't important to me. I ended up buying a bike from that account instead, and you do things that are important to you. Right now, I am buying lunches from my discretionary account because time is very important to me with a newborn. So, whatever it is that makes you happy, there's no guilt attached with that spend.
And I think that that's probably a lot of the foundation of people like me who are maybe spenders is that you don't have to feel bad about it. You just have to maybe control it a bit.
Yeah, and I think, start with owning it. You are or you aren't. It's neither good nor bad. Now, what do you need to learn or potentially change over time?
Yeah. The other thing is, like, I, for example, I'm someone who likes to buy a cup of coffee every single day, right? I go to a cafe, I sit down. This is one of the things that makes my life worth living. I don't have to give that up, do I?
No, not at all. It's about active choices. I'm the same as you, Steph. I'm a coffee drinker and buy one every morning. I like the ritual. Now we know we've got people in the office who are not big on that either. So there are other places where they'd like to spend their money, whereas there's other things in my life that I might choose to compromise on.
Yeah, it's about purposeful spending, right? So knowing you have a certain allocation of discretionary money a week, what is it you choose to spend that on? If there's not a fixed allocation and it's just infinite, you may choose on plenty of different things that don't give you any happiness or purpose. If the coffee is the thing that makes you happy, spend the money on the coffee. There's no blame, guilt, anything like that associated with that. Spend it whatever brings you joy.
Do you find that when you actually go through this exercise with people, they realise they're spending a lot of money on stuff that doesn't bring them joy?
Yes. So this is something that happens gradually over a long period of time, lifestyle creep, where people all of a sudden are spending more and more money. They've never really reined in the discretionary spending, and they realise that just spending more money each year doesn't come with a greater sense of happiness from that increased spend. And I think once you have a regular weekly amount that hits your account, ideally weekly because it's a shorter amount of time to focus on, you become more aware of what you're spending it on and ideally more aligned with the things that bring you joy and happiness.
In my previous job, I got paid monthly.
It's a killer.
It's a killer. It meant that I had on the first week the best week of my month.
Rockstar, right?
Oh my God, I had so much fun.
Yeah.
There was so much to do. And then come week number 4, my lifestyle did contract a lot.
Yeah.
Whereas like if I had, I guess, allocated that money week by week, that means that I would have had a more consistent level of happiness.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Psychologists say that humans are bad at big amounts of money over long periods of time. So if we can shorten it, narrow the focus, make it just easier to digest with smaller amounts over smaller periods of time, it becomes a lot more real, a lot more relatable. And it's something to keep in mind with all of your financial decisions. So whether it's buying a car, buying a house, think of it from a day-to-day or week-to-week basis. It's very hard to picture what $50,000 looks like over a 6-year period. If you break it up, it becomes a lot more tangible.
I think it's also an interesting idea of changing your scope because when you think about retirement, if you're my age, like retirement feels like it's a million years away. I mean, I'm in my 30s, but I know it's not, it'll come around faster. So like I can't actually picture a time where I will care about my retirement. I reckon I'm going to care about it a lot at some point, but then I won't have the habits in place. You've got to sort of start chunking it down. I can't get excited about retirement at my age is what I'm saying.
No, and that's why, our advisors at Tribeca and Matt in his practice, we focus a lot on security and freedom of choice. So the key tenets of financial well-being. So what relationship do people have to security and freedom of choice? If they have a heightened sense of security and a heightened sense of freedom of choice, they'll be living more of the life they want, and that will promote financial independence as well. And on the retirement piece as well, we talk a lot to financial retirement because retirement is so finite for people and it almost seems like it's an end game. Financial retirement for us is more about choices that then people want to make. Same career, dial down a career, choose a new one, charity work and the like as well.
Yeah, and those are decisions that you can make today.
Yeah, and it comes back to that what is important to you thing. So if stopping work or slowing down from work, spending more time at home, more time on your goals, whatever it is, if that's important to you, then it should be how you're allocating your funds and how you're allocating your strategy. So if we know that we want to reduce your reliance on work, then we need to know that in time, the income you bring in will need to be replaced with something else. And how much do we need to allocate a year to make that happen? How much do you need to capture from your surplus to make that happen? And then you can use your financial resources to live the life that you want to live, whether it's slow down work or whatever it is.
And fair to say as well, Matt, focusing on something for today, but also for tomorrow as well. So, Steph, it certainly can't all be about delayed gratification. Just the human brain is not built that way. There's got to be something for today. So if it's a coffee or it's lunch, but then also something for a rainy day or something for tomorrow.
Yeah, it sounds like it's all about balance.
Exactly, spot on.
The goal to me, it sounds like that you get your discretionary spending and then ultimately you should have a little bit of a surplus. Can most people find a surplus?
In most cases, yes, but it's not always 100% needed. It depends on your circumstances. So I'll use myself as an example. We are currently one income. We have a mortgage. We know we don't need a surplus right now. We can come back to surplus later on. So it needs to fit in with your overall life plan. You can have temporary periods where you don't have a surplus and that's fine, as long as there's a plan to, at one stage, return to surplus and then use your surplus to whatever it is you want to do for the future.
Yeah, and I mean, that's also quite liberating in some ways. You don't have to control your life so much that you don't have any fun now, but you need to have that as a point in the future where you have money set aside.
Absolutely. And it's a bias that a lot of savers have, that if they don't have a surplus, they can feel anxious, feel like they don't have security or a feeling of freedom. So it's something to remember that as long as you have a plan, then you can use your current cash flow or your future cash flow to align with that. You don't always need to have a surplus, but when you do, make sure you're putting it to productive use.
So, all right. So let's recap. We know where our money is going. We know if we're spending $2,000 a week on coffee or whatever, and we've gotten that in hold if we need to.
That's a fair
a lot of coffee.
Yeah,
I know. It takes a lot. So you spend, you know how much you're spending and where it's going, and then perhaps you're lucky enough to have brought some things in and maybe you have a surplus. And once you've got that in place and you're sticking to it and everything seems to be going well, you're not feeling too restricted. I imagine if you are feeling too restricted, you can always adjust. What happens after the surplus?
That's a good point about adjusting, because you can always just tweak it. That's the beauty of it. You can make small little changes. Once you have the structure in place, there's levers you can pull. Literally just weekly, you can change it if you realise it's not working. But once you've caught that surplus, so we'll use that example before where someone should have been saving the $40,000 a year and they've got the structure in place now, they're capturing that. Then you need to align that surplus with what you want to do for the future. So usually people will come to us with some kind of goal. It might be buying a house, could be setting up the kids, giving a gift to the grandkids, whatever it is. Everyone's got something generally they want to do. If it's buying a house, then you think, okay, how do I use that $40,000 a year to get to that goal? And that's where you can use your surplus to meet whatever it is you want to do in the future. At the end of the day, the cash flow is the thing that enables you to do anything you plan on doing in the future.
Also, I just wanted to, further to that, Matt and Steph, I wanted to highlight that it's interesting. Once you see people build their financial confidence through cash flow, it becomes, in a positive sense, quite addictive. They grow in confidence, they get better and better, because what we like to do is start a little wider with clients and give them enough wiggle room and enough fat in that weekly or fortnightly budget or cash flow. But then beyond that, they grow in confidence, they start to get better, more conscious spending, and then the sky's the limit. So it's, in some parts, structure and then just getting started. And then being kind to yourself that if there is a day or a week where there's an overspend, you simply get back on the financial horse.
It's almost like exercising a muscle.
It is, absolutely. Training the brain in a financial sense.
Yeah, and I mean, how do people usually feel after they've managed to get their cash flow in order? Like, is it a sense of freedom or a sense of accomplishment? Like, what are the emotions behind that?
Key word that comes to mind is empowered. So, we tend to find saver spender or people are in charge of their money or it's in charge of them. So they can flip the game in terms of, so suddenly money is working for them. They know where it is. They know what they want to achieve and they're walking around with their head held higher and greater sense of confidence. Empowered is the key word that I take from that.
I suppose that occasionally you will come across a client who is maybe spending more than they're making. Does that come up occasionally?
Yes, definitely. So again, back to the circumstance, because there may be a reason for that which is valid, and if so, there needs to be a plan and how you can make that shortfall. Often, though, it is just the case that their discretionary spending isn't within control. They might have credit card debt, personal debt, and you need to fix that. So it would end up getting out of control. This is where the people come to us with a very low sense of security. They usually in that scenario also have a low sense of freedom, because they know that debt's there and they need to do something about it in the future.
It becomes a little bit like financial Groundhog Day, doesn't it?
Exactly, yeah. And they carry this baggage around with them, which obviously there's guilt and other things attached to it. So it's just, like Ryan said, about making a proactive step to start with. It doesn't. The initial plan doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be a step in the right direction. And there's plenty of things you can do to make that happen.
And then I guess from there, people can make lifestyle choices if they need to. I guess I think the thing that people like me, the people who don't really know where their money is going, is that sometimes you think that ignorance is bliss. That I don't know what the situation is, which means it's probably fine. But there is a kind of both of you are smirking at me right now because I feel like you've heard this before. But if you actually, there is a lingering anxiety with that situation, that if you don't know where it's going, you can't actually rope it in. I think the saying ignorance is bliss in this instance is actually not at all correct.
No, not at all. It's quite the opposite. With understanding comes empowerment. Put people in charge of their money and they're living a life by choice. And what we often find is they're largely centered around family, friends, holidays, hobbies and experiences. It's not the next thing. It's interesting you bring up that point too, Steph, because Matt can probably talk to this better, but sometimes we see people who are doing better than they actually think, but they don't have a helicopter view on their financial situation. Therefore, their internal narrative is not very compassionate to themselves. So they're doing better than they are. Maybe they're making mortgage repayments. They're growing their net wealth. In a quantitative sense, they have a greater sense of financial security, but they don't consciously know it. So it's all a bit missed. That's
an interesting point, isn't it? Because so much of how people think they're going is in relation to the people who are immediately in their surroundings. That's so much worse now with social media, where people are just posting what they've got, not necessarily how they live and what they're sacrificing to get there. So is that part of your role, is to sort of keep everybody's expectations in check and tell them you don't have to keep up with the Joneses?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring up the Joneses, because we've even morphed that to keeping up with the Kardashians. So, but, for us, and that's the key thing about, as Matt said earlier, about having a plan. That means that family unit, whatever that looks like, they're running their own race. They've identified where their values are, what's important to them. They're not worried about a car someone drives or who they've seen at the school gate or who's got the investment property or who's going on holidays.
Yeah. Often people do come to us with goals that are more not something that's tangible for them or would provide meaning to them. So we ask them to dig a little bit deeper on that. Like, why is it that you want that? The underlying reason that they gave us that goal is probably what they're actually looking for. So say, for example, they want the $200,000 car or whatever it is. What is the reason they want that? Is it so they feel like they have a greater sense of freedom? And then is that the real thing they're looking for rather than the nicer car?
Yeah, and if we extrapolate that a bit further, Matt, so it might not be that they can financially afford that, but maybe they can partake in a car club subscription where they get that a couple of times a year or whatever. So it's all about trade-offs and benefits. A good advisor with high emotional intelligence will dig down, challenge the client in a respectful way without opinion, what's truly important to them. And then you basically see it in their eye. They're having an aha moment, the light bulb goes off and they understand, okay, this is what's really important to me.
And I think that if there's someone who's listening to this podcast right now and they're like, well, what's my goal? You can write down your goal. If it is, for example, the $200,000 car, write it down, sure, but then maybe examine the emotion behind it. What is it about the $200,000 car that calls to you? And is there another way, maybe, that you can fulfill that need?
All this does also come back to cash flow. So I'll give an example of a nameless client who we've been working with recently, but they want to do renovations on their house. So to understand whether this is possible, what the extra debt means to them, we first need to know what capacity they have within their income and expenses to fund more debt. It's the same with the house purchase. Could be the same if it was a $200,000 car. So if you understand your cash flow, you know what's possible and what needs to happen to make that possible.
Beautiful. Well, I mean, I think that says so much. Like, you can have all the goals and all the dreams that you want, but this is a good first foundational step, is understanding your money situation.
Exactly right. And one thing we haven't touched on, Steph, either, with cash flow, there's two levers. So we've talked a lot about expenses, but there's also an income lever too. So, helping clients understand, are they in the right job? We don't want them moving jobs all the time, but to understand their true worth for the value they provide. So just always important that there's two levers in the cash flow discussion.
So what you've got isn't always necessarily what it will always be.
Exactly right.
And sometimes the motivation you need to either make that leap, whether it's the promotion or the study or the career change, whatever it is knowing that makes the thing you want to do possible. So the motivation to have a cash flow plan first, realize what needs to change, and then make that change.
And for some people, they're like, well, maybe I haven't got the surplus that I'd like, but the payoff to getting the surplus I like would having to do a really demanding job. And then you're like, maybe my surplus is fine.
And we have found that a lot of people during COVID and then post-COVID are making those life choices. Maybe they don't want to do the travel for work or go to 4 days a week. They're choosing, without it being a cliche, they're choosing more good life than they are just working to pay more tax and have more things.
And that's back to your point before, Steph, about not everyone needs to have a surplus. So if your good life means just getting by with your current rate of work and working less days, spending more time with the family, great. That's your plan.
I think that's so good though, because we often think about finances as just pure acquisition. Pure acquisition, having as much as you possibly can, and that's a sign is that you've just got things. People don't actually have to live that way. And I think that point of post-COVID is a really good sign that there was a big reckoning for some people. The work slowed up. People decided they liked being at home. And a lot of people have made huge lifestyle changes that have actually made them happier.
And I'm sure all three of us know people who may not have a lot of the world's wealth, but they're living a very happy and fulfilled life. They're actually quite content. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we're seeing more and more.
And you don't have to have a huge salary to do that necessarily, but you do have to know, first of all, your cash flow, which is what this episode is about. I think that's a great way of doing it. And again, we talked about this before, but removing guilt from the equation entirely.
Removing guilt, empowering people to make their own conscious decisions around money. So the structure does a lot of the heavy lifting. In a busy life, income comes in, we automate what we can, and then we create awareness in what we can't, and we limit that on a weekly basis.
And again, you can make decisions that make you happier in the long term. It's not just about spending money mindlessly. It's about thinking about where it goes. And then you can have things that you like that you didn't necessarily think you had the money, because you would have been guilty about that bike purchase once because that's a large expense. But if you save up all the lunches, it's actually quite a manageable expense.
It's also very satisfying when that money leaves your account and you go, geez, I feel good about buying that bike because that took me a long time to buy. Or if it's a new phone or whatever it is that you want to buy, you really earn it.
It's a lot more gratitude for the purpose, right?
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Well, look, that's it for this episode. Thank you, Matthew, so much for joining in. Just to recap, if someone listening now wants to get on top of their cash flow, where should they start, Ryan?
They should start with understanding their income, their expenses. That's the first point. Second is setting out a plan in terms of even short-term goals, what they want to achieve, and understanding the relationship between what they spend and what they save and how it relates to those goals.
And once you've got a grasp on that, try and make it easy for yourself. Automatic deductions for your accounts, a specific discretionary account, all means that you don't have to think about it so much. And hopefully then you'll find yourself with a little surplus, and that's the money that you can put towards a fulfilling future or your goals. And I think we have a full episode on goals in us at some point or another because there's so much to talk about there.
Fantastic.
If you don't want to miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening now. Every fortnight, we're going to be here to help you find a good life. See you next time. Where financial advice is provided, it is general in nature and does not consider your personal circumstances. You should consider its relevance to your circumstances or particular needs. Do your own research and seek professional advice that is tailored to your specific needs and circumstances before making any financial decisions.